Welcome, everyone. My name is David Waltzman, and looking forward to talking to you today about Feedonomics, Snapchat, and our great partner, Take Some Risk. Again, David Waltzman, I head up partnerships at Feedonomics. That entails anywhere we get data from going into our platform, as well as any destination data may be exported to. My overall charter is to reduce friction in the feed ecosystem and just make it really easy to go where your customers are. I'm joined today by Dwayne Brown. He's the founder and head of strategy at Take Some Risk, and really looking forward to getting more of his practical approach to actually running Snap. Back in May, we did more of a product introduction to dynamic ads on Snapchat, and Dwayne has a lot of hands-on experience as to how you actually execute, where he's finding the value, and is going to provide a ton of insights as to how all that works. So with that, Dwayne, it's all yours.
Cool, thanks Dave for the great introduction. Thank you everyone for showing up. And if anyone happens to be attending from like Europe or Australia, thanks for staying up really late if you're in Australia, and thanks for tuning in during dinner time if you're in Europe. So today we're going to talk about Snap ads. Now, I know lots of people are like, oh, I spent all my money on Google, or I spend all my money on Facebook and the gram, and that's great, and that's amazing. But one thing we believe at the agency, and we tell prospects, clients, friends, is you should never put all your eggs in one basket. Because one day, Google may wake up and decide your business isn't worth it, and they're just gonna stop your ads. A great example is last week, Google decided that people who sell security equipment, quote unquote, can no longer advertise on Google Ads. Because that means if you sell like security cameras, things of that nature, your business has pretty much been decimated if you spend all your money on Google. Because at the end of the day, we only rent time on advertising platforms. We don't own the time on advertising platforms. And at any day, any ad platform can take away your business. So it's always good to diversify. And if you're going to diversify, and especially as we head into Q4, I think Snap ads is somewhere you should look at. So let's talk about Snap today. So the agenda I basically have for the day is we're going to talk about like who uses it, because I think there's obviously a misconception around a lot of people when it comes to Snap, and they always say it's people under like 18, and even though there are lots of people under 18, there's more than just 18-year-olds who are on Snap. It's not like TikTok, which is another conversation for another day. We'll talk about who runs ads, how to run ads. We'll talk about our shopping feed, because obviously shopping is an important part of any ad platform. Google isn't the only game in town when it comes to shopping. Facebook has their dynamic product ads. Obviously, Snap also has dynamic product ads. We'll talk about how we think about the Snap funnel, which is how we think about moving users down the path. And then we'll also talk about like where we start off with clients. And we've been running Snap since last year. So we've done work for both Birdies, which is a D2C shoe brand. So if there's any women on the call, they are most likely familiar with Birdies. If there are no women on the call, or there's no one who wears women's shoes, they're really fancy, but really nice shoes, and I highly recommend them. And then we've also done work for FTD Pro Flowers. So for any maybe non-Americans on the call, they're one of the largest flower delivery companies in the world, and very similar to 1-800-Flowers, and is one of their direct competitors. So when we think about Snap ads, we think about the user base. And so on any given day, people spend about 30 minutes on the platform. And of those 30 minutes, people spend 20 minutes playing games. So Snap has both minis and games. And so a lot of time is spent either playing games solo, or more importantly, playing games with people's friends, whether it's your friend down the street or your friend halfway around the world. And so if one of your audiences is people who play video games, which is just not for nerdy people anymore, lots of average people play video games, from like the soccer parent or the hockey parent to the person who like works in corporate America and loves like, I'm trying to think of a game that's on a phone, but I don't play games on my phone, I play on a PS4, but whatever game you'd have on your phone basically. So games are a pretty important segment for Snap as they try to grow their user base and make Snap not just a place you do message in, but a place that becomes a community for people to socialize, interact, and talk with the closest people within their network. we've all been going over the pandemic the last quarter, and one thing that's happened for Snap and lots of social apps is they've grown exponentially over the last quarter. So when you compare the growth in Q1 and Q2 over that of 2019, Snap saw a 20% growth of 38 million people, which is phenomenal growth for any app, let alone one that was sitting at 190 not even 6 months ago. And as we enter summer and potentially a second wave in Q4, I expect that 229 million number to only escalate even farther as more people want time socially on apps and maybe get away from their family that they love, but they just need some time away. And like any ad platform, I always take certain stats with a grain of salt, but Snap would say they have $1 trillion buying power, which is probably true in some ways. I mean, I'm a millennial, I'm 38, so I have more money now as a 38-year-old than I did as a 22-year-old. But whether we have $1 trillion buying power, that remains to be seen. And so when you think about the 229 million people on Snap, we basically send 4 billion snaps or messages a day. That works out to about 20 messages per day per user. So obviously, when you're only sending 20 messages a day, which might only take you 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes at most, because you spend 5 of those 10 minutes looking for like that perfect GIF or GIF to look for, it makes sense why you'd spend 20 minutes of that 30 minutes in a day playing games, because you're not sending that many messages. And this step is only for the US, so sorry for any fellow Canadians or non-Americans on the call, but Snap does not release data for certain countries outside of the US. But at least we know that of people who are 13 to 24, 90% are on Snap, and then people who are 13 to 34, which also includes Gen Z and millennials, 75 people are on the app, which is pretty staggering considering if you look at where Snap is right now, this is more or less where Facebook was, I want to say 13 to 15 years ago. So the growth rate we've seen on both Snap and even TikTok is starting to eclipse what we saw with Facebook, which is why I've dubbed Snap my breakout platform for brands. And so if you want to go somewhere that isn't Google and isn't Facebook or Instagram, Snap is the place you need to be. And the last stat I put on Snap slide because I think it's super fascinating. If you love Facebook, if you love Instagram, great platform, we use it with our clients as well. But an interesting stat that I found is that on any given day, 38% of people don't use Instagram, use Snap. Now, I don't know how Snap came up with this number. I don't know how they asked this every question, but I think the fact that a large percentage of people who are on Instagram potentially don't use it on any given day and use Snap instead speaks to the power of the platform, both attracting people, but also retaining people. It is easier than ever to build an app in 2020 or even 2019, but it's hard to retain people and get them to come back and use your app because there's just so much competition for people's attention today. And back in the day when we used to complain about, what are you paying per click and what is this costing us? Today we're asking, where are people spending their time? Where can we buy people's attention? Because people's attention is more valuable than what you paid for a click in 2020. To end off this section on users and who uses it, being 38, being a millennial, for anyone who's of my age, you probably know who these people are. If you're a bit younger on the call, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, great show in the 90s. I rewatched all 6 seasons a couple years ago. I would say it's a show ahead of its time, but Will Smith has a show on Snap. And so Snap's got this section called the Discovery section. It's got TV shows and curated entertainment. I usually call it late night TV meets the tabloid section of the supermarket meets famous people being convinced by Snap to come on the platform and build a TV show. So he's got a show, he releases an episode, every week. You can watch it. I think he's on season 2. I'm definitely behind on watching it, I'm not gonna lie. But if you have an interest in certain famous people, there's a good chance they have a show on Snap, which is gonna help attract an older demographic that has money. And if it attracts an older demographic that has money, that means you're going to need to be on Snap whether you like it or not, because people used to scoff at Facebook back in the day and said it was only for teenagers. But 15 years later, they've got 40 billion people on their platform, and nobody laughs at Facebook anymore because they've got everybody. And I believe that Snap will be the next Facebook. So running ads, this is probably all why you came here. So let's talk about ads. Ads is a super interesting thing. and it's not always easy to do. So when I think about running ads on Snap, I always think about like who should use it, right? And I think there are kind of 3 brands that should use the platform. And so the first brand I think about is, I call it the traditional brand, right? They're a bit old school. You know, maybe you maxed out Facebook, maybe you maxed out Google. You're trying to figure out where to put your money, where to put your time. Maybe you don't want to be in Pinterest because it's not a direct response channel as much, or people on the platform are aspirational looking. And so if you're a bit old school, you've maxed out the other 2 big channels, I think Snap is something that should give your attention, because as we saw earlier, 38% of people are not spending any given day on Instagram, and they come with a Snap. It would make sense that if more of your users are on Snap, why wouldn't you advertise on the platform? Also, if those who don't know who the guy in the picture is, that is The Rock. I'm going to use The Rock to describe all 3 brands we're going to talk about, because I think The Rock exemplifies each brand. This is Rock, family man with his kid. We also have the Celebrity Rock. So his is TV show Ballers. If you haven't watched it, great TV show. And I think of celebrity brands as brands that have lots of content, right? If we got hired to work with your brand, you could give us a folder tomorrow, whether it's a Google Drive folder, a Dropbox folder, that just had tons of content. So that's images, that's video, that's press clippings. Because all of that content allows you to create advertising for Snap and allows you to scale and test things a lot faster than a brand that has no content and has to start from square one. The biggest challenge on Snap, which is a similar, and the biggest challenge you have on Facebook and Instagram, is the constant stream of content and ads you need to come up with so that you can run campaigns and figure out what is and isn't going to work. And similar to Facebook, 3-4 years ago, we find that video is one of the best pieces of content right now on Snap. And so if you don't have video, along with obviously other ads, it makes it even challenging to run on Snap. So this is, we call the Celebrity Rock. So this is now called the Renegade Rock. If you've not seen Hobbs and Shaw, great movie, I enjoyed it. And so I call it the Renegade brand because these brands zig and others zag. They do things that are not traditional, they're not celebrities, maybe they're brands you've never heard of because they do things a little bit differently. And I think of brands like this is they've maxed out Facebook. They don't think Google makes any sense, or they think the CPCs are too high, or they don't get how search works, or they don't want to pay the Google tax of bidding on your own brand name. These are brands I think would do really well on Snap because you're willing to try things your competitors aren't. You're willing to put some money in and run a test and not turn a test off after 2 days just because it wasn't quote unquote successful. So if you consider yourself a renegade marketer, you're considering to do things your competitors aren't, you want to go out on a rim and lead and be at the front of the pack, then I think you should be a renegade brand and join Snap. And be like The Rock and drive a badass motorcycle as well. So account setup. I spend a lot of my day on Reddit. I probably spend more time on Reddit than I should. There's PPC stuff on Reddit. It's highly recommend you join it if you are not on it and you want help with front ads or have questions. But the question we get asked a lot on there is either what do people do or how to set up, business managers and ad accounts and pixels and things of that nature. So I thought to devote a bit of this section to account setup because even though I think it's really easy, I also know that I've been doing this for 14 years, and so what appears easy is only because I've worked my ass off for 15 years to learn how to set up things properly so that we don't have issues in the long run. And so if you've ever set up a business manager on Facebook, it's pretty much the same thing on Snap. If you go to business.snapchat.com, it will forward you to a URL where you can set up a business manager. So you put in like the name of your company, which is going to be the name of your business manager. You give a phone number if you want. You name your ad account. If you have 2 or 3 brands or 2 or 3 websites, you can also make an ad account for each of those different brands or websites. And then when you're done, you are inside the home of your business manager, and so you can enter your address, your phone number, your credit card. Your account won't go active or live until you added your credit card, so it's important to make sure you add a credit card if you want to just see your account status go from pending to active. And then when you've done that, you're probably thinking about, oh, I need to set up like my shopping feed, or I need to set up my Facebook pixel. And we've got a couple different ways to do that. So if you're not a very technical marketer, and I can imagine most people who are on this webinar are pretty technical, but if you have a friend who's not, and you're on Shopify, you could use the Snapchat Ads app, and that will let you either set up the Snap pixel between your Shopify store and Snap, or you can set up your pixel and your shopping feed between your Shopify store and Snap. The shopping feed is optional. You can just use the app to set up your pixel. You don't have to use it to set up your pixel and your shopping feed. If you don't want to go down that route, you could use like Google Tag Manager or another tag manager system to set up your pixel. Even though Snap's Help Docs does not recommend or suggest you use Google Tag Manager, we've used it with lots of our clients and it works great. Even with ProFlowers, we embedded our tag manager in the footer of the website because no one's allowed to add code to the header of the website, and it worked flawlessly. So if we have someone asking, hey, can we add Google Tag Manager code to the footer of our website and get Snap to work? The answer is yes. I did not know that 3 months ago, but now I do. And then obviously, if you use the Snapchat Ads app to set up your pixel, and not set up your shopping feed, then you work with Feedonomics to set up a custom feed for your Snap account. And if you use Feedonomics to set up your custom feed, which makes sense because why else would you use them if you didn't use them for all platforms you have on? The 3 things you would want to potentially customize for your shopping feed is both your SKU ID and your product title can be longer than what you have both in Google and Facebook. So if for some reason you want a longer product title, or for some reason you're trying to run a test and someone's like, I need to have a different SKU ID for these products, you can have a longer SKU ID. And then you can also, which is going to be really interesting what I'm about to say, you can also use availability in a unique way. There's an attribute under availability called pre-order. So if you have a product that's not launching, let's say, for another 2 weeks or next month, you could add it to your shopping feed, trigger it with the attribute pre-order and availability, and try to sell it in advance, which I think is kind of cool. For anyone who's into like sneaker culture here, you know, we're used to seeing like drops, and when they drop sneakers really early, and you go up and line up in line, you buy the sneakers and tell your friends how you bought the sneakers. Well, now you can sell stuff in advance on Snap, get some money in the bank, and then hopefully use that money to fund more production of your product or SKU. And then the only other thing I would say is, much like Facebook, only push your parent SKUs, because if somebody looks at multiple sizes of a SKU or multiple colors potentially of the same SKU, you may not want them to see like 2 or 3 of the same SKU, with the only difference being the size. So generally with clients, we only push the parent SKU, much like we do with Facebook, so that we have a single product when somebody clicks on it to come back to the website. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Snap funnel, which is kind of cool. So I usually think of Snap as like 5 apps in one. Things have changed a little bit over the last 6 months. Basically, Snap is when you send a Snap or message to your friend. You know, it could be an image, it could be a video that you recorded. Snap and chat are basically merged now. So chat is also when you send messages, you know, text-based messages to your friend. Stories is when you send stories to people. Obviously, and live events are when, you know, Snap partners with, you know, the MMVAs or other events like Coachella to run live events. There's a video game that did an event in Snap the other day, and I can't remember what it was, but they did a live event. So Snap is always trying to partner with other big brands to draw more people to the platform. And then Discovery changed a little bit, where now it's like your Discovery feed, and that's where you go and find like the TV shows from Will Smith, you find other people's stories / TV shows. So think of Discovery as like a curated news section where you could find like very good TV shows, but also like things that are like the tabloid section of the supermarket. And I guess the other thing I always try to say here is when you think about Snap and you think about stories, think of them a little bit as like Facebook and Instagram. Advertising in Snap doesn't get you in the story section, or advertising in the story section doesn't get you in the Snap section. That's really important to understand because they're different ad units. You know, your Snap ad could be an image or a video. Traditionally, your story ad is going to be a video, but you can do a slideshow of images. Though video works better because it's more interactive, because all your story ads appear in the discovery section, because Snap has basically merged the stories and discovery section in one section. which is why I said this image is not necessarily most up to date, but I couldn't find a more updated image to share with you. So I went with this one because I thought it would still give a good example of what things are like on the Snap platform if you've not downloaded it. Cool, so when I talk about the Snap funnel, I think of like things in the upper funnel, the middle of the funnel, the bottom funnel still. I think some people say that doesn't exist, but I still think it does. There are people who've never heard of your brand and are super cold traffic. And yes, there are those people you can show an ad to and they'll convert right away, but there's lots of people who do need to see an ad 2 or 3 times before they convert. And so when I do things that are upper funnel, I think of lenses, which is based on augmented reality. For those who don't know, augmented reality is either 3D objects, effects, characters that appear in front of your phone when you're either taking a picture or video, and then you take a picture or video of that object. And so augmented reality on Snap is called lenses, and so they've got things like Lens Studio where you can make your own augmented reality. You know, brands also make their augmented reality. If you spend enough money on Snap, the Snap team will make a lens for you for free. So that's like called the tier 2 status. We've done that for FTD Pro Flowers and other brands. The tier, I'm not going to say because they might change, but it's not tons and tons of money. You don't need to spend like $100,000 a month, but you do need to spend like somewhere in the 5-figure range a month in order to get that. The other upper funnel thing I think is filters, or what I would call overlays. So overlays or filters are effects you put on your picture after you've already taken your picture. So lenses happen before you take your video or your picture, overlays happen after. So very popular on Snap, you probably see pictures of it, people who put on like dog ears or cat ears or animal ears of some sort. Obviously, in the images on the slide, we've got a woman who's done like seashells, and I'm going to say those are cat ears potentially, maybe. And then you've got 2 friends or potentially a couple who have like a Chapel Hill of their image. So filters are great if you want to insert yourself in somebody's like experience and brand life. But you've got to create a filter that people are going to care about and want to use. And I think that's really hard for brands. Like, how do we create an object that isn't just utilitarian? It's something that people actually want to use. And also isn't going to come across the current environment as like racist or appropriation. You know, good examples of that is like Snap has been dragged through the media because they did like this Bob Marley thing and they did this broken chains thing this year. So if you're going to do overlays, just be like culturally sensitive to people in communities and make sure that you're not going to potentially, you know, offend a swath of people. So I think in the middle of the funnel, I think of like commercials. So if you've got video that's doing really well on Facebook, if you've got video that's doing really well on YouTube, you know, it could make sense to do a commercial on Snap. They're 3 minutes or 180 seconds long. The first 6 seconds are not skippable. You don't have to do 3 minutes. You could do a minute. You could do a minute and a half. You could do 30 seconds. People do watch commercials and video on the platform because Snap is a heavily visual video platform. And obviously, since people spend a lot of time in the discovery section of the app where there's a lot of TV shows and the Will Smith show, having video, if you're going to do stuff on Snap, is really important. Static images are great, they do work, but video just is a far superior medium on Snap. So make sure you take your best video from YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and bring it over to Snap and see if it works on that platform as well. Because if people like your video, means they'll pay attention to your brand, they'll probably follow your brand, because Snap announced 2 weeks ago, if not last week, that they're starting to build out brand profiles, so people can follow brands. Brands can push out content that is only on the profile. And so similar to, you know, Instagram profile or Facebook page, or even on Pinterest, you've got profiles. Brands being able to have profiles right now means that you can start to collect groups of people who are interested in your brand, and as a brand, you can start to cultivate a look, a feel, an aesthetic, a point of view, and have it all show up on your profile. So we think at the bottom of the funnel, we think of both the Snap ads and story ads. So the Snap ads appear between your stories you send to your friends. They can be, as I said earlier, either images, or they also can be like video, which is really cool. And then we have story ads. Those story ads only appear in the discovery section, which we talked about as the news and show section of Snap. And story ads are typically video that has like a hero shot or a tile that has that is a cover, that has a tile that's on the top of your video. But you can do a story ad that's just like a slideshow of images. We have never done a story ad with clients because either clients just don't want to do it. They don't want to go through the work of like editing the video and then putting together a tile or some sort of custom tile, and just there's more work with a story ad. I think it's worth it to do it because it's a less competitive medium, but no clients really take me up and down for the like, let's run ads on the story section. But I do know talking to our couple of account managers we have at our agency like at Snap, that it is less competitive in the story section. So if you're going to go on Snap, you do have video, I encourage you and implore you to make a story ad, because I think you will see good performance from there. And then also, as Dave mentioned earlier, and as we talked about, like Facebook has dynamic product ads, Snap has dynamic product ads and collection ads. So obviously, you can take your shopping feed that you set up earlier, that Feedonomics has built for you, and use that to run DPA or collection ads for remarketing lists. You could do it for retention against people who've already bought and try to get them to upsell and cross-sell. One thing we're going to run as a test on Snap, as you know, which we on Facebook, is doing a feed that is only your higher end products. So if you sell products that, let's say, cost anywhere from $20 to $1,000, doing a shopping feed that is only products over $200 or SKUs over $200, and using that in your DPA, because usually, and this works really well on Facebook, and we're testing it to see if it works on Snap. If you have this shopping feed that is only higher end price products and you run that as a DPA campaign, it usually signals to the platform to try and go after people who are showing a propensity to both spend more money and purchase higher end goods, which means you have typically a higher average order value, which means you have a better return on ad spend, which means obviously you just make more money. So don't always just do your whole shopping feed for DPA collection ads. Sometimes look at seeing if having higher end price goods in your SKUs of your shopping feed will work out to only go after people who've got money. Because it's great when people spend $20, I'm sure, in your store, but you'd rather people spend $100, $200, or $500. So a couple of things that can be a little bit complicated. So how to pick a story ad is one of those things. And so basically what you want to do is you want to go create a unit inside of Ad Creative in Snap and basically see a story ad, fill in all the features, upload that, and then go make a campaign. You don't want to try and make a campaign and then do a story ad because it won't work. It's a bit of a flaw in the Snap system, I'm going to say. It's pretty similar with doing a shopping campaign. You've got to go into the catalog of Snap, click on the button that says create a campaign next to your shopping feed if you have more than one shopping feed, and then it takes you to the tool to go make an actual shopping campaign. You can't just go and say create a campaign inside of Ad Manager and pick a shopping campaign. Don't ask me why. It's just the process that it is. If you go to the help section on Snap, they'll tell you as much. But I tell people because it threw me off for a loop last year, and it took me a couple tries to like learn this. And if I want to make a story ad, or if I want to make like a shopping campaign, I've got to do it a little bit differently than I would with other ad units, like a single image or a single video. And then when you do pick your campaign, if you want to do a story ad, you can only pick an awareness, engagement, and app install or catalog campaign. These are the only three that are available for the story ad, so just keep it in mind because generally story ad is higher in the funnel at times, but I do think you can make a story ad work in the bottom of the funnel if you use it for like remarketing and retention, which we'll talk about in a second. So there's three more things you need to understand about Snap if you're going to do it. First of all, when you launch your first campaign, you're going to have to optimize to a swipe, which is effectively a click, because on Snap you swipe up for things. And only until you've got enough swipes that equal 50 purchases within a 7-day rolling period do you unlock the optimization objective at the ad set level for purchase. But in order to access that purchase objective, you've got to pause your current ad set, make a brand new ad set based on the previous ad set you had, or you could just make any new ad set you want, and then pick that purchase objective. You can't like edit the current ad set that's running based on the swipe. You can't duplicate that ad set that's going running and try to pick the purchase objective. You literally have to make a new ad set from scratch and then pick the purchase objective. And then what we usually do is just pick all the other assets we had from the old campaign that we're going to optimize them towards the site. So we'll pick the same like targeting, we'll pick the same like URL and ad and everything, because we basically want the system to like continue to optimize, but optimize obviously at this point towards a purchase and not a swipe up. The other thing that's kind of important is, much like Facebook, Snap does it, optimization on a 28-day click or swipe up and a 1-day view. I think the 1-day view is a little bit excessive. I would love to be able to look at like a 6-hour review or 12-hour review, because like any ad platform, I always want to know, are they over embellishing their numbers at all? But right now it's just 28-day swipe up or click and a 1-day view. And the last one, which is really important, is most ad platforms attribute a conversion to the day of the click happened. So if someone clicked on an ad last week, Google or Facebook would attribute to the click that happened last week. But Snap attributes the conversion to the day the event happened. So even if someone clicked last week and converted today, Snap would attribute the conversion to today. So that's what's important to understand. Like if you start a campaign last week and you start to see sales come in, odds are the sales will be attributed to today. If those sales started today or tomorrow, if those sales started tomorrow, they wouldn't be attributed to last week, even if somebody clicked on the ad last week. So where to start? This is kind of the final home stretch section, and then I've got like one surprise section. So we always go with remarketing. Often believe if you can't get remarketing to work on any ad platform, it's probably not a platform for you, or the person running your ads, whether it's in-house, consultants, freelancers, agencies, have no idea what they're doing, or you don't have a product market fit. It's one of those three things. So we'll get, add to cart or initiate checkout. We look to remarket to people who viewed category and collection pages, or we look to remarket to people who viewed your PDP or your product description pages. As all things being equal, one of those three should convert for you. We've got a global D2C brand right now, and they actually see a lot more people convert to ad spend who view the collection of category pages than people who either started the checkout or initiated the checkout or added to shopping cart, and more so than people who even view the PDP pages. I'm not sure why people convert better at the collection of category pages, but they do, and so we just put more money into that target. If you've got your marketing working, things are going great, you're happy with your sales, you're trying to ad spend, what do you do next? So we think of retention. So retention, in our view, is going after people who already purchased again and come back a second time, a third time, a fourth time. You don't build a business and you don't build a brand by just having somebody purchase once, unless you sell like engagement rings and all you sell engagement rings. Well, of course, you're only going to have people come back one time. But if you sell a product that people can come back and buy a second or third time, retention campaigns make a lot of sense. And so we look at retention from either advertising to all your customers, only advertising to customers who are 2x your average order value. So if people are 2x your average order value, it's a big enough list. Those are people who are big spenders and you want to try to get them to come back and buy a second or third time. Advertising people who bought 2+ times for you and get them to come back a third time, a fourth time. Usually for people who bought 2+ times, we'll get either over the last year of data, we might look at the last 2 years of data. And obviously, if you're going to do 2+ orders in the last year or 2 years, you want to try to have 5,000, 10,000 orders, so that we have enough data to build like lookalike audiences off of potentially in the future, and even just have enough people on that list to just do any sort of retention campaign. Because if you only have like 1,000 people because you just started an e-commerce brand last week, well then you're probably not going to have enough people if it's only 1,000 to do a retention campaign, because there won't be enough people on Snap, and there won't even be enough people on Facebook to show an ad to anyone. So prospecting is obviously the next place to go after remarketing and retention. So you could do lookalike audiences based off any of the lists under retention or remarketing. You could take your lookalike audience lists and base them off of interest. So you build a lookalike audience, you layer on an interest list, and so Snap will find people who are in your audience and like that interest. And then you can run a campaign towards those people, because if they're in your lookalike audience and you have a good list to base the lookalike audience off of, the people in the lookalike audience should be really high quality. And if you layer on interests that you know could work really well for maybe your Facebook campaigns, you're talking to customer interviews that you've done, that should work better than just doing lookalike campaigns. We generally recommend clients look at lookalikes plus interests. All right, so down to the final couple slides here. And so the big challenge, we talked about this earlier, if you're the celebrity and you're about the top of the jam, you've got tons of content, but maybe you're not the celebrity brand, you're like the Rock who's the Renegade, or the traditional brand. You're like, Dwayne, I love this great content, Dave, thanks for doing this webinar, but like content is a challenge. My design team is busy, or can't get what I want, or we've got an approval process that is like crazy. I've got a little tip for you. We've seen clients do it. It totally works. You've got to have faith. And so we all know that like user-generated content does really well, but what does as well as user-generated content is content that looks like user-generated content, but is not user-generated content. And here's what I mean. Basically, in order to run ads on Snap and to use your ad manager, and I didn't say this earlier, in a racial sense earlier, you've got to have the Snap ads downloaded on your phone. So you've got to like have a profile from Snap and use your app. And so if you've got the phone and you've got the app on your phone, using the app, what you could do is you could open it up, depending on what your product is, you could film a video with the app. You could then download your video, re-upload your video into Ad Manager. And obviously before you download your video, you use things like the text overlay, use the emojis, you really jazz up your video so it looks like a video you send your friend. And this is something I think about with clients. I tell clients, if you're going to send your best friend a video about the product that you sell or the brand you work for, what would you include in that video? That's the video you should make. Because if you're going to film a video on the Snap ad, you're going to want to make it look as authentic as possible. So what you send your friend is probably the most authentic thing you could do. And if you download that video, you upload it in Ad Manager, and then you run it as an ad because you've used the text overlay, you've used the emojis, you've thought about what you're going to send your friend, you're being as real as you're going to get. All things being equal, people think that is a UCG video because it looks like it was natively built in the platform, which it was. People will convert on the ad, and for what amounts to, depending on how fast you do it, half an hour of work, an hour of work to film the video, maybe do a little bit of editing. You now have an ad you can run really cheaply, really quickly. It didn't take like a whole production studio, editing from a dozen people. Odds are your boss's boss will sign off on it because it's going to look really great. And if your boss doesn't sign off on it, make your boss the best. If this ad doesn't do well, I'll never talk about doing this idea again. In theory, the ad should do well. We've seen it work well for clients. We've seen it work well for Rothy's. So this is a great way to make something that looks like UGC, but isn't UGC. It's really cheap and easy to make. It's only a bit of time. And you can easily do it on the fly as much as you want. You just have to have the imagination of what kind of videos you're going to make and the ability to make the video, download it, upload it, and turn it into an ad that you can either run on the story ad placement or you can run the Snap placement on Snap. And I'm done my section.
Thanks, Dwayne. That was a lot of great content, extremely informative about the different flavors of Snap ads, and as well as how you see it more on a day-to-day basis. So I'd like to go into more of the nuts and bolts of how we enable that to happen from a feed perspective. And so if you're looking to get on Snap now and you're not a current Feedonomics customer, obviously we'd love to have you on board. The first step we would do is start off with a master Google database and then create derivatives from there. A lot of the rules with Snap are very similar to Google with regards to the feed spec, so there's not a lot of changes. We'll go through some of the differences and things that you definitely want to optimize for, but we're going to help you get onto Snap quickly. We're going to, since we already have contacts at Snap from both a technical support perspective, but also from a business and account management perspective, we can really grease the wheels and make this process go as fast as we can. We also, at Feedonomics power hundreds of different channels. Snap, as Dwayne walked through, really does have a unique audience. And we think that if that's your target, or maybe an additional target to your core demographic that you're pursuing, this makes a lot of sense. So with Feedonomics at a high level, we're taking in your e-commerce data, could be from one of the major SaaS platforms like a Shopify or BigCommerce, could also be from maybe more of an enterprise system like an Oracle Commerce Cloud or SFCC. Could also be just a completely custom website, maybe using Magento. Regardless, we're able to generate a feed and then optimize for channel-specific exports, in this case, for Snapchat. What is feed optimization? All right, so what we all understand is that in our e-commerce platform, we have product data. And a lot of times that product data may just get pushed through to different destinations, like that Snap app for Shopify that Dwayne mentioned earlier. So they take the attributes from your store and push them. Really simple. At Feedonomics, what we believe is that in order to optimize for eyeballs, increase your ROAS, on other platforms, you may be decreasing CPC. Regardless, you want to increase relevancy. The best way to do that is to have a really stellar titles, descriptions, categories, and images that fit specifications for each of these respective channels. We also see really commonly in descriptions, things like extra spaces, rogue HTML, or maybe even just snippets where someone tried to delete and wasn't able to do it all because we're just human. We can address all those things programmatically at scale and really clean up the feeds. At the bottom here, you see an example of Nike, right? So on the right side, there's this really cool shoe, the Air Max. And if you're navigating through Nike's breadcrumbs, that makes a lot of sense. But outside of that, you're going to be a lot more descriptive so that someone understands what the Air Max is and why they should be paying attention. So adding the brand. Nike has a ton of credibility. You want to make sure you get that out there. Air Max running shoes, right? So that's the product name as well as the product noun. Then we also have the size of the product and the color. And these attributes are really important, especially in the apparel category. Right, so if you're listening to this, chances are you're probably running Facebook DPAs today. Out of the several thousand customers we're serving at Feedonomics, about 4 out of 5 are currently on Facebook for DPAs. If you're doing that already, you know that that's an extremely crowded space. Snapchat, as Dwayne mentioned, created a very similar experience, both from a business manager perspective, but also from a user perspective as well. And so we think it makes a ton of sense to adopt. Really the education piece for going to Snap Dynamic Ads is really around the audience, that $1 trillion in pocket share, which is going to grow by 6 to 7 times in the coming years. The age band, the sex that it appeals to, the types of products that are really popular, the up and coming disruptor brands. And so we think that once you get on, it's going to be fairly straightforward. What we want to help you with, again, is to make sure that you're set up for success with the best feed. So down to the feed spec, here's a couple of differences from Google. I'd say that all of our clients are on Google, which is why it's a good comparison to go for from the feed spec perspective. So titles are limited to 40 words, or sorry, excuse me, that would take up the whole screen, 40 characters. Okay, so 40 characters is just about that length that I showed you for the Nike shoe example. On Google, by contrast, you can have up to 150 characters. All right, so since Snap is strictly a mobile platform, the less words, the better, but at the same time, you want to be descriptive and make sure that you get the right product in front of people. So 40 characters, if you think about things like descriptions on Google that, are up to 5,000 characters, that's not really relevant at all here, right? So that'd be a stark difference. There's some optional fields you're going to want to make sure you look at, like age, group, and gender. You're also going to want to look at seasonality, right? So apparel and beauty are really large categories on Snap. And so you want to make sure that if you have, swim trunks for summer or a bikini, or in the winter, ski jackets, really make sure that you're on point here, not just treating your whole catalog the same. One of the reasons why this is emphasized even further on Snap versus a platform like Google is that they accept lifestyle images, which, if you're not familiar with that term, it means that it's not just your product on a plain white background. You're able to actually show the product in use, which really brings it to life. So showing the product being used in its environment is much more powerful. Another difference from Google is the use of promotional text. So if you have free shipping or holiday promotions or big discounts, on Google, you're not actually able to include that in the title of the product. But on Snapchat, you're more than welcome to include these to enhance the titles. Okay, so how does this integration work? You would log in as an existing customer to the feed support portal. You would ask us to add Snapchat as an export, and then our team gets to work on your existing feed and shaping it to look good for Snap. We then set up an FTP URL, which is how the Snap Ads Manager reads in the feed. Again, these are all things we worry about. You don't have to necessarily understand what that means. And then as you create your account, that all gets connected and wired up, and you're off to the races to start with campaigns. So in summary, the value proposition on Snap for DPAs or dynamic ads is really the audience, right? With a similar performance to what you're accustomed to on Facebook, but at a much lower cost because, as Dwayne mentioned, it's not as crowded yet. So there's a lot of room to stretch at lower cost. And again, if your target is that demographic, that 13, to I think it's to 25 or 24 or up to the 34, then I mean, this is where they're spending their time. I think over half an hour a day on average for Snapchatters. There's a variety of different flavors of ad formats available on Snap. The one that Feedonomics would help you power is dynamic ads, but someone like Dwayne can definitely help support you in the rest, as he's outlined earlier in the presentation. So if you had a chance to tune in to Snap's earnings call yesterday, they just made an announcement about adding more regions for dynamic ads. And so here's a great quote from Adidas. They just started spreading it in Europe to UK, Germany, France, and Netherlands. And they're seeing over a 50% lift in ROAS, which is awesome on their investment in the platform. So we definitely recommend, if you are a global brand, keep us in your thoughts, and definitely don't be shy about being aggressive out there with dynamic ads. To help you out with that and getting started, we have a partnership with Snap, and what we'd love to extend to you is if you follow the link at the bottom of the screen, that'll take you to a Feedonomics landing page for Snapchat. And if you create your account on that link, you'll be able to get a $500 credit when you spend your first $500 with Snap ads. So again, please follow the link at the bottom of the screen. If you don't have a pen and paper handy, if you just Google Snapchat Feedonomics, it'll come up with our landing page. You can see a video of our other webinar as well with Snap. You can book a demo if you're not a client already. And either way, you're also able to click on the link to create the account from there. So we really look forward to supporting you, and thanks for joining in today. We're now going to go into a Q&A. So if you have any questions, now's the time to set it up. Dwayne's gonna hop back on video, and we'll tag team these questions together. So let's see what we got. Okay, so we have a question if the presentation will be available at the end. The presentation video will be posted online within a day or so. That all goes to YouTube, And so you can definitely watch it there. If you have any account-specific questions about your existing feeds, definitely talk to your Feedonomics account manager, and they can help point you in the right direction. All right. Here, Dwayne, what's the best way to include lifestyle images as part of the feed?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways you can do it. Obviously, if you're using the Feedonomics to do all your feeds, you could just have them pull in your lifestyle images from your website, or you have it hosted somewhere else, and then have that pop into your shopping feed and pushed out to Snap. If you're not using Feedonomics, you still need to find a way to like host those lifestyle images somewhere so it can get pulled into your feed somehow and then pushed out to Snap. So the easiest thing would be to host your file somewhere, have Feedonomics push it into their database and push it out to Snap would be the easiest thing to do.
Perfect, thank you. We have another question here. Is Snap the right audience for my brand? I can take that one. I'd say definitely. Without sounding like a broken record, about 3/4 of folks 12 to 34 are on Snapchat in the US, and total monthly active users now, as of yesterday, I think was about 238 million. So it's definitely growing and a meaningful population. Let's see, here's another one. For you, Dwayne, what are CPCs like compared to Facebook?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. And so they are competitive to Facebook, but I don't think that's actually the right question to ask. The right question to ask is, what's my cost to acquire a customer? You don't care what your CPMs are, and you certainly shouldn't care what your CPCs are. You care about picking the right creative to the right audience to get the conversion you need to drive a sale. CPCs and CPMs are irrelevant, and the focus on that is to take your eye off the ball, which is on making the best creative possible, because the difference maker between a good brand and a great brand is your creative at the end of the day. It's not your CPC. So when someone talks about a cheap CPC, I roll my eyes like there's no tomorrow because they have no idea what they're doing.
Gotcha. And let's see, here's another one. If I'm currently not running DPAs on Facebook, is there a big lift to bring on Snapchat? I can take that one. So on your side as a Feedonomics customer, since you use us as a managed service, there shouldn't be too much extra time on your side needed. The lift would be more on the Feedonomics end to make sure we fit the feed spec correctly. And this usually isn't too much of a delay if we're already exporting for other channels for you. So have no fear. And if you end up adopting those afterwards as well, like I said, it should be pretty quick onboarding.
You should also be running DPA on Facebook. That's like a no-brainer. If you've got a big enough audience list, like you literally would print money and make money. It's like the easiest campaign to run on Facebook.
Let's see, another one here. Does a brand with a low AOV make sense on Snap?
We have not done any brands under $75 from the AOV perspective. I have heard of other people being able to run campaigns at the low AOV. I guess it comes down to, let's say your AOV is $40, per purchase. Who's buying the product is, older people, younger people. If it's seniors are probably not on Snap, and if they are, it's probably less than 1%. But if it's people in high school, college, university, I'd say it's worth taking a stab at. Maybe start off with remarketing like we talked about, or start off with retention. See if you can build up enough data so the system understands like who your customer is, and then worry about like prospecting and going after cold traffic.
Gotcha. And we have one here about images. Can I use Google PLA images? So I can take this. It's possible, but again, if all you're doing is sending the same data over, it might be effective, but you could do so much more by creating content that's meant for the platform, as Dwayne walked through earlier. And so I would really recommend, if you can, having some of that lifestyle content, or even if it is just a white background, maybe there's the different aspect ratio that might fill out the screen more than the traditional portrait photos in Google Shopping. Let's see. And here for you, Dwayne, what's the best ad format outside of shopping ads?
Yeah, so we just run around a snap ad format, so either as a single image or as a video. Especially with remarketing, we find video performs a lot better for clients. When I say perform better, I mean drive purchases, have a good AOV, have a good return on ad spend. So if you're done shopping, the next step would be running snap ads either as single images, static images, or as video.
Got it. Thank you. So we have 2 minutes till the top of the hour. It looks like that was all the questions. I'll give a moment if there's any others that trickle in. All right, I think that's a wrap. Thank you again, Dwayne, for sharing your wealth of knowledge with regards to Snapchat, and thank you everyone for tuning in today.
Thanks everyone for showing up. Have a good day.
Cheers.